Welcome to another insightful episode, and in particularly an exciting episode of Me&my Health Up with your host Anthony Harcher, a healthy man according to my kids, aka clinical nutritionist and lifestyle medicine specialist. The purpose of this podcast is to enhance and enlighten your well-being, and today we'll be chatting with the #1 international bestseller co-author of What the Hell Do We Do Now? Mental health expert and strategist, clinical specialist, trainer, facilitator, certified resilience coach, Mark Butler. Drum roll. And we're going to be talking on his new white paper that he's recently released on burnout. Mark helps leaders to be able to talk about mental health in a meaningful way. Combining his clinical and commercial experience, Mark works to upskill leaders to promote open and caring conversations, create psychological, safe workplaces, effectively reducing stigma around mental health, and get in front of those issues that hinder peak performance. So, welcome. Hey, Mark, how are you doing today?
Very good indeed. Thanks, Anthony. How are you?
Excellent. So great to have you on the show again, because episode 51, which we did together, which was on mental health and stigma, was a great hit. So really keen for sharing with the listeners the new topic that you've just written the white paper on, and that being burnout. So let's start with, what is burnout?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. Burnout is the World Health Organization calls it an occupational phenomenon. In 2019, it's the first time it was ever kind of publicly acknowledged as being an issue. And people jumped in it and said, oh, it's a diagnosis now. There's a diagnosis of burnout, but it's not. It's and we have to be clear around that. It's recognized in some of the psychiatric models, etc., and the classifications that physicians use. It's seen as an occupational phenomenon, and by that they mean it's real and it exists, and it's close and possibly closer than we believe or than we think. But you can't go to your GP and get a diagnosis of burnout. But if you were burned out, you would go to your GP because of the physical effects and ramifications of being burnt out can cause significant and lasting health, physical and mental health conditions. But burnout itself is recognized as a sort of a complex interaction, if you like, between three sort of domains. The domains being exhaustion, and you can break exhaustion down into mental, physical, and emotional exhaustion. So you have, on the one hand, exhaustion. The next sort of domain is something called cynicism, and I think a better word is probably resentment. So that somebody who is experiencing burnout and as a result of, we'll say, chronic stress in their workplace or on their role, they'll develop a level of cynicism and it's kind of stop caring, and actually start to resent either the organization or their boss or their team, their peers, or even their customers, and the client base. And that's when it gets really dangerous for an organization. The third aspect of burnout then is what they call efficacy, or what I would probably, again, probably a better word would be our ability. Our ability to do our job diminishes. Even with the best will in the world that we want to do a good job, we're just at that stage where we're not concentrating properly, and we can't give our best to the role. In my experience, I have a lived experience of burnout from some years ago. And what I found, two things that were very important to me. And the first one is, I was the last person to recognize it or to notice it in myself. And I think for your listeners, that's a really, really important point, because if we fail to recognize it in ourselves, we're just going to carry on and not change anything in our environment. So, if I can just get to Friday, I'll take the weekend off. If I can just get to month end, and the boss will be off my back. If I can just get to the quarter, and then we'll be okay. If I can just get to the end of financial year, if I can just get to Christmas, and we just keep moving the goalposts on ourselves. And so as a result of that, we tend not to see what's actually starting to happen for us. And that was my experience. Was actually it took another one of the executives in the organization to pull me aside after a meeting one time and say, "Man, it's just work. Don't worry about it." And I said, "What do you mean?" And she looked at me. I actually spoke to this person just last night, and we were talking about this experience. And I said, "So what do you mean?" And she said, she looked at me and said, "You better go to the bathroom." So I went into the bathroom and I had a look, and there was tears coming down my face. And even then I was looking at it and looking at me like I was somebody else, because I hadn't made the connection between this physical manifestation of burnout and what was going on in my head. And even then I go, Jesus, what's all that about? But it was at that point, and this is some years ago, that I said, something's got to shift here. Something's got to change. And I did make the sort of changes that I needed to make to recover from it.
And those three areas sound very interconnected. So you mentioned the first area being the mental, emotional, physical, and then you've got the other exhaustion, and then you've got that cynicism. Yeah. And then the third, which just escaped my mind. But
efficacy or
efficacy, that's right.
Job, really.
Yeah. So like if you're physically exhausted or mentally exhausted or emotionally exhausted, then that's going to result in natural, you being more cynic about things because that's the exhibition of that sort of how you feel, right? And then if you're also physically, mentally, or emotionally exhausted, then your productivity's obviously going to be lower.
And actually, and what I found, I started to forget people's names. Even people I was working very, very closely with. And that's just, my brain was fried. I spoke to somebody the other day who said that he lost the ability to spell. He was writing words and he's looking at them and I go, what was I thinking putting that in there? And then they start to question, am I being dyslexic or am I, what I mean? What's going on here? But that's actually what it is. It's just our ability to function effectively is greatly diminished as a result of the sort of the trifecta here of exhaustion and that sort of resentment and cynicism and ability to do our job.
And it would all feed one another. So if you're not doing your job as to the ability that you want to do it to, then that's going to affect your mental attitude, in terms of, I'm a failure, I'm hopeless, I can't do this, and that's going to result in more cynicism, and it feeds itself.
It's self-perpetuating. It's a bit like bushfires that are burning rapidly enough kind of create their own wind by sort of burning off oxygen and creating that sort of flow effect, if you like. Yeah. So that's really, it is what happens. And because it creeps up on us, we don't tend to see it ourselves that quickly. So somebody else is most likely going to spot it in you. And actually, there's a great analogy here that I often speak about. Coal miners, the greatest sort of risk or fear that anyone in the mining sector for hundreds of years, their greatest risk and fear was carbon monoxide. So down the mine, something you couldn't see, you couldn't taste, you couldn't smell, you had no idea it was there until you actually succumbed to it. And, in my head, I immediately draw a line between carbon monoxide and stress in the workplace, right? We don't see, it's not something you can taste or pick up, or it's not tangible. But to counteract that, miners, used to bring a canary in a cage down the mine. Now, the canary was always male, because a male canary will sing incessantly in search of a female, no matter where they are. If there isn't one around, they'll sing for one. And so this was their way of testing their workplace. So the canary came down with the miners during the shift, And people listened out for the canary. And if you couldn't hear the canary singing, you went and checked on him to see how he was. And if he was kind of looking not so good, that was a warning. We'd better start thinking about getting out of here. If the canary was on the bottom of the cage, right, everyone drop everything, we're out of here, right? This is a dangerous, toxic workplace. And the problem for us, I think, I draw the analogy between workers today and that canary. So we have to stop blaming the canary if our people are succumbing to workplace related burnout or stress, and we can't. Our traditionally our response is being to build their resilience and make them stronger and more capable of facing the sort of stress at the coalface, if you like. And I think that's the wrong approach. Yes, it's got a part to play, but we have to stop blaming the canary, and we have to stop looking for stronger canaries. I think we have to start looking at the workplace itself. And there are three, and that's not to say we're blaming workplaces. There's a business to be done, and there's work to be done, and it has to happen. But I think we have to look at job design, suitability for the role. Are they clear on what's expected of them? Do they have some level of autonomy in their role? Do they have some sort of input? Do they believe that what they do matters? Do they have a sense of belonging to a team, or are they isolated? And now we're starting to wander down into the hybrid work sort of conversation. But I will say this: there are the three sort of main experts that I follow in this space. There's Christina Maslach, and Michael Leiter, and another person called Jennifer Moss. And their line, they all say that almost everything that causes workplace related burnout stems from organizational problems. And so, burnout is about your workplace, not your people. And I think there's a very, very strong element to that. There are other types of burnout that people will present at work with, like parental burnout, caring for elderly, so special needs kids, etc., or just taking on too much. People can burn out from those things, and they don't park that when they come into work. So but workplace-related burnout is an organizational issue. You can't blame the canary for it. We got to start looking at the distribution of the role and how that's done.
And, we're still in the pandemic, probably over the worst of it. Have you seen more cases? Well, we're both residing in New South Wales. I'm in Sydney, so I'm probably more at risk than you are. So has there been, because given it just hit all of a sudden, unexpectedly, we didn't really have a prior experience one, unless you lived through the first pandemic, which there wouldn't be many people alive, and so workplaces had to adapt quickly, and that involved everyone pulling together, working harder, longer to ensure the company stayed afloat. So has there been an increase in the cases of burnout as a result of the pandemic?
Yeah, significantly so. And again, it's not just work-related burnout in that case. The increases in burnout we're seeing is can be sort of aligned with a kind of blurring of the work-life relationship, if you like, or became work-family harmony was the sort of new buzzword there for a while, and haven't seen that one come back for a bit. But yeah, so it's, can I switch off? Do I switch off? And if I don't, the organization is very flexible around me sort of teaching the kids whatever it is I need to do during the day. But then I have to play catch up in the evening. And now I don't know the difference between when I'm working and when I'm not. And I have to sort of be mindful of that and be careful of that. So yeah, I think there has been an increase. There certainly has been an increase in the levels of burnout, and even in the levels of what people would consider to be burnout. So, as I said, strictly speaking, you need to have exhaustion, cynicism, and efficacy in the mix in order for it to be sort of classified, if you like, as burnout. But if somebody says they're burned out, then in my book, that needs addressing. And if that's what they say it is, then that's what it is. And we have to sort of support them around that. Otherwise, it'll just go underground. And we're back to that whole stigma and that sort of perceived sense of shame that people have that they weren't good enough. That was my experience. I should be able to do this job. I should be good enough to do it. And if I can't, well, then I'm failing. And we're seeing that in the health sector more than anywhere else, I think. And again, it's because, people enter into the health sector as a sort of a vocation or a calling, and any first responder role, really, police, fire, ambulance, these are all, people wanting to do good for their community, etc. And it's in roles and areas like that we're sort of seeing burnout most of all. Yeah.
You mentioned this lack of delineation between work-life balance because of this new hybrid model. Have you got any tips around how to help people around this delineation, because I can see that as being a major contributing factor to potential burnout?
Yeah, look, I think, and we all in our roles have to develop a mindset around knowing that we can switch off and knowing that we have to switch off. I think Dan Siegel used to talk about what he called a healthy mind platter. And by that, what he was talking about is everyone needs to have some time where we tune out and we turn off and we switch off and we introduce some play time and some introspective time. And each of these different areas and play was Dan Siegel was very, very sort of, I guess, serious. He was, some element of play has to form a part of your day. And that is when you're doing something that's joyful and brings you some happiness. So, the old adage, all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy kind of thing. And there's a reason why it became a cliche, So in terms of tips, I think setting boundaries for yourself and for others. You might have seen this. I certainly have in emails in recent times saying, I'm sending this at the bottom of the email, a disclaimer saying, I'm sending this at a time that suits me. There is no expectation on you to answer it until you are back in your workplace. And I thought that's a nice idea. But it's still, as far as I'm concerned, you're still alerting the other person to think about their role, unless they have switched off their phone and stuck it in a drawer. And I think we don't really do that. Scheduling times when you can switch off, I think, is very, very important. And you need to have a strong boundary around that for both yourself and the organization. And I think it falls on leaders to make that decision. I think it's law now in France that there are something like 12 hours in the day between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. are the only times you're allowed to contact your employees. And if you fall outside of that, you're in breach, you're breaking the law, which I think is a fantastic idea. I'd love to see that introduced here. But of course, there's things like the gig economy here, globally now is changing a lot of that, and people are saying, I want to work when I'm ready to work. Pardon me. Which suits you doesn't necessarily suit the other party. So being clear enough to be able to put your laptop and your phone in aircraft mode and just not receive messages. I think we need to be good at that. But we also need to look at things like sleep, diet, exercise, mindset. We talk about resilience, and organizations are probably bored of hearing about resilience as a subject, but I think it's really important that we do, because I believe that resilience is how you achieve well-being. You cannot have, a healthy lifestyle and a positive and constructive outlook and a sense of momentum or happiness unless you have a level of resilience that supports you to sort of advance despite adversity, if you like. not being an inclusive part of it. But so to me, well-being is what, but resilience is actually how you achieve it. And so health is, sleep, diet, exercise, mindset. And we all know what we need to do. We pay more attention to the battery on our phone and our laptop than we do to our own. And that needs to shift, I think.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with everything you've said. And you've touched on that point about scheduling time, putting time aside, prioritizing time. And, you referred to that, maintaining that resilience. And to maintain that resilience, you need to be looking after your health and well-being. And that needs to be a priority.
If we don't fix the foundation, none of the rest of it's going to kind of slot into place, And when you are more resilient, you're much more likely to see stress in the workplace as just being that. We're going through a stressful period, or I've got some budgets or deadlines to hit and I'm going to hit them. If that's happening all the time and we don't have a solid, healthy base, we will succumb to that stress. Every single one of us has a breaking point. Every single one, and it's just a question of how much, and for how long that we face it. And because there's a big difference between stress and burnout, they're not the same thing. Stress, chronic stress will cause burnout, but when you're burnt out, you have no energy, you're flat. But when you're stressed out, your mind is racing, you're energized, you're bouncing from one thing to the next, you're working long hours and you're doing all of this stuff. There's a different energy level to it. Even thinking about it, burnout is just, even the phrase burnout comes from the sort of late 60s, early 70s, sort of around San Francisco. And it was hippies who were burnt out because they dropped out, and there was a whole tune out, drop out, all of that. And that's where the phrase came from. And it was from that space that it was introduced into sort of more the corporate vernacular, if you like. Yeah. So there's a different energy between being stressed and being burnt out. And we can tolerate stress if we are more resilient to it and we have resources around us, and both internally and externally. So we have to work on ourselves, and we have to work in ourselves and work on around ourselves if we're going to manage these things properly.
And you mentioned before the employer needs to set up that safe environment so that the employee actually can put aside the time to do exercise, to get a good night's sleep. He's not, he or she's not interrupted during their downtime, and so it's really a two-way relationship that needs to make this a successful, or in order to reduce cases of burnout. Because I can imagine once an employee is burnt out, then the cost to the employer is enormous.
Many times their salary and more. Yeah. Particularly if the cynicism kicks in and they become disruptive to the rest of the team and become disengaged. And sort of, if I looked away there, I actually had some notes here that I'd written, that I was just listening to a suicide prevention podcast earlier on this morning. And it was speaking to exactly that, how organizations need to create the environment where people can feel like they belong, they have a level of autonomy, and that they have some impact on what they do matters, and some sort of control in how they actually perform their duties and how they do their role, which speaks exactly to what you're saying, I think, yeah.
And I'm just picking up on a couple of words you said. You said the autonomy piece, and COVID has, or the pandemic has certainly brought more autonomy around where employees work, whether it's at home or they go into the office. But the other piece is escaping me at the moment. Right.
So it's what I talk about is the autonomy. In other words, having some kind of say on how you perform your role. And I think what organizations seem to be saying is, when we had to shift very quickly to working from home, people found new ways of doing their, completing their tasks, if you like. So I think as we sort of progress into that hybrid sort of workspace, people are going to have to do a bit more of that. Job needs to be done. We're not all in the office together. We're going to have to figure out how to make sure that all of the roles and tasks are absolutely clear and everybody knows what they need to do. And if they find a different or better way of doing it when we're not all in the room together, there's great value in that, because people feel like that, what they're doing is contributing. We're a pack animal and we need to know that we're doing that.
It's just come to me. The other point, or what I wanted to pick up on, was this sense of belonging, which is very important for that work environment. So as much as there's been some autonomy created through where you work in terms of at home or the office, this sense of belonging is something that the companies are having to grapple with, because the more remote workers you have, that sense of belonging, there's a disconnect versus being in the office. So can you just share some thoughts as to what employers are doing in order to create better belonging in this hybrid model?
Yeah, look, to me, belonging is an absolute fundamental. In fact, what's his name? Bessel van der Kolk, who's a trauma specialist and mental health specialist. He says that the primary driver, the number one thing for all of us, is to know that we are safe in the company of others. If you don't have that, you've got nothing. You've got nothing to build on. Western society, rightly or wrongly, has always had this idea of be the best you can be, climb over the top of everyone, be at the front, be number one. And perhaps there's a cost to that. I'm not sure. It's a very big philosophical conversation, but I can say that somebody who has a sense that they belong to a team is going to perform far, far better. And somebody who feels like they're not, that they're ostracized or that they're on the outside, and that they don't have the same level of if they don't have the same sort of level of connection that other people within the organization or with the team has, is going to feel like an outsider. And it really, this old adage, it takes a village to raise a child. Really, I think it takes a village as a concept. It takes a team to sort of look out for each other, support each other, and make sure everyone's heading in the same direction. And in order for that to happen, everyone needs to be clear on where they belong and what part of the team they play. And it's turns like for a leader to be able to create that environment for people who are in the office or people who are not in the office. Everybody needs to be involved. Everybody needs to be sort of playing their part, if you like. A bit like a team captain running onto the football pitch, needs to know that everybody there is able to play the game and stick to the game plan, and nobody is often out of sight, sort of limping at the other side of the pitch, because it's going to affect the entire team. So it does take a village, and it takes a village of team. Your team is your village, if you like, to support each other and to ensure that everyone is able to contribute in the way they're supposed to be able to do. And that takes clarity of job role. It takes a sense of belonging. It takes a sense of knowing that what we do matters. So it takes a sense of impact, and for people to feel safe. And if you've got all of those things, so if they're resilient, autonomous, impactful, safe, then you've got engagement. If you've got someone in your team who is cynical and burning out, that's like an infection. Because this sense of belonging, if we're feeling like that in the team, we're probably going to try and recruit somebody into our cynicism so that we're not alone. And we'll start speaking disparagingly about the boss or the team or other team members or the organization or the industry or the customers. That's a natural thing, and we'll do it whether we're aware of it or not. That's something that we will do. We will try and recruit somebody into our level of cynicism, and stuff like that spreads through an organization and through a team so quickly. It causes disharmony, it causes rupture, and people will be actively disengaged. So we have to keep it clear.
Absolutely. In terms of that, you mentioned the importance of everyone feeling as part of this belonging, that they feel supported by one another. In this case of burnout, identifying that someone is, well, ideally you want to get it before they're burnt out, right? So I guess is there telltale signs when someone is sliding off the slippery slope before it's too late, like before it gets really bad?
Yeah, look, there are, and I usually talk about, there's probably about 10 or 12 questions that I would put in front of somebody if I was in this space, around like, so things to notice in yourself, first of all. Do you start to lose your track of thought, or do you no longer have time to engage with your family or in your favorite hobby? Are you fully present in conversations, or is your mind somewhere else? Are you getting enough sleep? Do you feel exhausted? Do you feel like, you have a knot in your stomach all the time? Are you eating? Are you not eating? Can you eat? Are you dropping the ball on commitments? There's a whole host of things, where we find ourselves kind of detaching, if you like, from our outside world, the things outside of our role, that would tell us that we are burning out. And really then in terms of a behavior, can you push back if you think you're sort of succumbing to a level of burnout? Can you say no? Can other people say no to you? If you're a team leader, I hear this a lot from team leaders, where they say, oh no, I have a great rapport with my team. We get on so well together. Everyone knows that they can talk to me about anything. I have an open door policy, and we have beers on a Friday and lunch on a Wednesday. But that to me is actually a red flag, because what that tells me is your people are so close to you that they don't know where you end and they begin. And they are going to be very, very slow to put their hand up and disappoint you, or let the side down, or let the team down. I was at or listening to a talk. I can't remember the gentleman's name, but he's the mental health expert for the All Blacks. And he was saying it's incredible how many injured All Blacks would run on the pitch and hide their injury because they didn't want anybody else to wear the jersey, even for a game, just because of the risk of actually losing their place in the team. And when you've got that level of commitment, if you've got that with your own team in your organization, where they feel they don't want to let you down or let the side down, you need to be smarter, far smarter at spotting when they're probably struggling, because you're going to have to spot it before they do. So if I was to give you a slogan, I would probably say burnout is everyone's business. And we need to be able to look out for each other.
Yeah, because the colleagues around them may identify it before the manager does,
and before the individual does. Yeah, that was my story, and anyone else I've spoken to, I didn't see it coming, and didn't know what it was when it was there. I just thought, I'm under stress, I'm under pressure, but all of the other things started happening, and make no mistake, there are physical costs, things like cardiovascular issues, digestion issues, immune systems, inflammation in the body, to say nothing of all of the mental health issues that can arise as a result of that sort of prolonged exposure to stressors.
What would you say to a listener that's thinking, oh, this could be me? I identify with everything you're saying, Mark. I'm feeling this, and they're working for their employer. They've got a major project delivery date or something they're working towards, and all these telltale signs are emerging. What's your, I guess, your top 3 recommendations to that person in terms of addressing it before it gets too late?
Yeah. Look, to me, I think the first place you got to go is your physical health, sleep, diet, exercise, mindset. Am I looking after myself the best way I can? So, and that includes, am I switching off at nighttime? Right? That deadline or not, you're going to be of no value to yourself, your family, or your organization if you don't take steps to ensure that you can sort of manage yourself. That's the first place you go to. Then the second spot is speak to your leader and try not to be afraid about it. And you can word this up using your own language. And it is, look, I'm not at my best, and I think I'm succumbing to what looks to be burnout, or what feels like a level of burnout. So I'm not able to perform at my best, and I'm going to need some help and support here. And I'm giving you a heads up because this deadline is dependent upon it. So a leader would much rather hear that than after the event and say, "What happened? You've dropped the ball," right? So I look, if you manage those two things first of all, then at least you've created the environment where you can reach in, you can get the support you need, and you've acknowledged that something needs to shift in yourself and in your environment. And if you do the first two of those, the next sort of part of recovering from burnout can actually occur. And that is where you get your mojo back. You address the issues that are causing the stress and burnout in the first place, and you're the best version of yourself you can be. I say to people all the time, give it your best, but don't give it everything you've got. It ain't worth it. Yeah.
Yeah, well, you've lived it, and I guess, and now you're walking the talk, because I could guarantee everything you've just said is what you apply on a regular basis in terms of you looking after your physical health. And is there any other gems that you're doing that you'd like to share that's really helping you stop burnout? Because I know you're in high demand in terms of the work you do with corporations and supporting their mental health and well-being of their employees. So is there anything that we haven't discussed yet that you're doing?
I think I would probably say all elements of resilience. Once you're looking after yourself, all elements of resilience, I think, are important. Things like having a vision and goals, and they can be your own personal, or they can be the organizations, and regulating your emotions, etc. Sort of your composure and your tenacity and ability to collaborate with other people. I think these are all important aspects of resilience, but they require you being healthy in the first place. So as we've said, that first place is health. Second place is reach out and get the support that you're going to need. Because if you can't see these things approaching, then you're probably not going to be as effective trying to deal with it yourself. In terms of sort of from an immediate perspective, I say to people all the time, breathe. Right. And that means switching off even for just a few moments, we might have spoken about this in our last session. I'm not really sure, but there's a friend of mine, Cash, and he's based in Brisbane, and he had the task of teaching the Australian Federal Police around what he called tactical composure, and they love that name because it speaks of.
We didn't discuss it, so please share it.
So Cash had to. He was commissioned by the Australian Federal Police to teach sort of mindfulness and sort of composure and breathing exercises to the tactical response group. So Cash arrived to present to these guys, and he's looking at a room full of big burly federal police, the tactical response with the black uniforms, the balaclavas, the rifles and all that. And they're just kind of looking at this guy, and he goes, Jesus, how am I going to talk to this? But his line was, I am going to teach each one of you what I call tactical composure. And of course, the name tactical, they sit up and take notice. When everyone else around you is flying into a panic and there's high anxiety and people aren't thinking clearly, I'm going to teach you how to ground and center yourself and compose yourself so that you are calm and collected and in control. And he said, and here's the kicker, nobody around you is even going to know you're doing it. So that sounds really attractive to somebody in a tactical response position. And they said, Greg, what do we do? And he said, well, let's practice it here and now. So breathe in to a count of 4, hold it for a count of 4, breathe out for a count of 4. Let's do that a few times. And they said, okay, great. Now what else? And he goes, no, that's kind of it, really. And the point he was making to them was, this is the fundamental strategy for anybody who was in a heightened or anxious state, or who was feeling sort of stressed out and a bit overwhelmed. Because what's happening is your fight or flight response in the body is triggered. And it is designed to keep us alive. It's a survival instinct. And it doesn't take any chances. If it thinks there's any chance at all you're in some level of danger, this fight or flight response kicks in. And what it does is it turns off the thinking part of the brain, and it says, I've got this, brain. And then it starts, you're breathing rapidly, getting you primed, ready to fight or to flee. And narrows your vision, and you start to sweat, and all of those things that we've experienced, from time to time ourselves. But the only way for your body to tell your brain that it's okay, I'm back in control now, is to slow the breathing down. And it's that breathing that tells the body that we're now out of danger and that we can sort of compose ourselves. And so when Cash was explaining this to the tactical response group, he said, every military organization and every tactical response group in the world uses this strategy, and it's called box breathing or combat breathing. And even snipers will train themselves to shoot between breaths. And Olympians, actually, who are in shooting and archery, etc., they're so exquisitely in control of the sort of pressure and stress of competition that they actually train themselves to fire and shoot between heartbeats, right? So you can't do that if you're right. So they train themselves to sort of slow down the breathing and to sort of trigger all of their senses. And this is what mindfulness is all about. But I think that's a great story of teaching the people who are most likely to be in that space that the most fundamental, easiest thing you can do, and is actually the most effective, is to control your breathing. Because once you're doing that, the rest of it slots into place. So I teach people those breathing exercises. That's your go-to. Keep that in your back pocket in case you're ever finding yourself stressed out. And just learning there are some other sort of slower breathing techniques. Thich Nhat Hanh was that Zen Buddhist, Vietnamese Buddhist. He had a great one, and there were 8 words, and you repeated the words to yourself in your head, sort of. But so obviously 8 words, 4 breaths in, 4 breaths out. And the 8 words, and I use this all the time. In fact, I used it before we started here this morning. And so the words are, I'll give them to your listeners. First word is in, so you breathe in on the in word. Out, deep, slow, calm, ease, smile, release. Right? So that's 4 breaths in, 4 breaths out. And if you're doing that, so in, out, and so on and so forth, you can do that 2 or 3 times, and it just brings your anxiety levels way down. Did it for somebody yesterday who was in a panic attack in a Bunnings store, and we just did that 3 times, and they said, "Okay, good, I'm cool, I'm okay now." It's amazing, isn't it? Everyone's looking for the magic switch and the secret sauce and all the rest of it. Nah, breathing. If you can learn to control your breathing, you've got this.
And it's free, and it's with you 100% of the time.
Exactly
so
right.
It's magic.
Exactly right. That's exactly right. Yeah.
Awesome. So great to chat with you again, Mark. Another super episode, and really keen for the listeners to know how to best reach out to you. If they're an employee within an organisation, or they're the leader, how to connect with you and get further support.
Yeah. Best place, probably send me an email would be the first one. So it's mark@markbutler.com.au. Or find me on LinkedIn. I'm always hovering around in there. And I speak quite a lot actually around burnout and around what individuals can do. So like I'm the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff for here's what happens if you have succumbed, but I'm also the fence at the top of the cliff. Here's how you can prevent it. And then keep everyone back from the edge of the cliff. That's talking to leaders around how you can create the environment in your team where burnout is everyone's business and we look out for each other. It takes a village to raise the village.
I love those concluding words, Mark, and I'll certainly include the links, or certainly your email, in the show notes, as well as the link direct to your LinkedIn page.
Yep.
So that will also be in the show notes, so the listeners can just scroll down and go directly to your LinkedIn page, or send you an email.
Yeah,
and
stick my mobile number on there as well. Yeah.
Okay, will do, Mark. And once again, I really appreciate your time, because I know you're in high demand. You've shared so much value today on the episode on burnout, and I learned a lot, and thanks, I love your storytelling. It's incredible. So
it does bring it home, you know. So look, I am busy, but I manage my energy, not my time. That's kind of how I approach it. You know, I can't dictate when people are going to ring and they're in crisis mode. So I just make sure I manage my energy, and we can all do that.
And you probably do that breathing exercise before you take the phone call, right?
If I have time, I will. If not, join the call. You know?
Yes.
Brilliant.
Yeah. So thanks again, Mark. I really appreciate it. And to the listeners, if you liked and found the episode really of value, please share it with others that could also benefit from Mark's wisdom. And stay tuned for more insightful episodes of Me and My Health Up.